another thing is that upon registering, you're all asked to read and sign off of our safer spaces policy. Um, and just so we're all on the same page, if you behave in violation of that policy, we have the right to remove you from the session if need be. And finally, I'm going to go ahead and read a land acknowledgement, and then I'll turn it over to Nat and Kate. So as we meet virtually, while physically dispersed, let us take a moment to reflect on the meaning of place, and in doing so, recognize the various traditional unceded lands we occupy today. The organizers are in Portland, Oregon, which is the territory of the Multnomah, Wasco, Cowlitz, Cathlamet, Clackamas, Chinook, Tualatin, Kalapuya, and Molalla tribes, as well as many other unknown or unnamed bands. Let us also acknowledge that we are connecting on a virtual platform. We're privileged to have access to the internet, a resource that is not easily available on U.S. reservations, and out of reach for many low-income people in the U.S. who are disproportionately from Black and Latinx communities. We invite you to join us in acknowledging this, as well as our shared responsibility to make good use of this time, and for each of us to consider our role in reconciliation and decolonization. And without further ado, let's take it away, Nat and Kate.
Well, thank you so much for having us today. Yeah, I'm Kate. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a laid off preschool teacher and one of the founding members from the Growing Seeds Workers Union.
Hi, my name's Nat. I also use she, her pronouns, and I'm also an organizer and founding member of the Growing Seeds Workers Union. I was working as a preschool teacher until layoffs came with COVID times, and here I am.
Yeah, so today we're going to go over a few different things. Nat, can you change the slide? Yeah, so we're going to talk about a little bit more about our union, our history as a union, and then go through what our experience was with forming one, from just talking to your coworkers to going public and having a vote. We're going to talk a little bit throughout and mostly at the end about thoughts about what unionizing looks like in this current moment with the COVID-19 pandemic and with global uprisings against anti-Black violence. The social political environment for creating a union is really different right now than it was when we started like a year and a half ago. So we're gonna look at that, and then we're gonna have some time to ask questions and think together. So we are members of the Growing Seeds Workers Union. We represent preschool teachers, teachers of infants to 5-year-olds from 3 different Growing Seeds locations. And we're made up of workers who are currently laid off and some workers who are on site. Growing Seeds reopened pretty quickly after the state shut down under emergency childcare. So we have people in a lot of different places and a lot of different situations, but we're still all organizing together. And we're organized under ILWU Local 5, which is the local in Portland for the International Longshore and Warehouse Workers Union. Local 5 is a little bit of a non-traditional union. They represent Powell's workers, Aramark workers at Evergreen College, which is the food service at Evergreen College, Oregon Historical Society workers, and us. So it's a little bit of a fun hodgepodge of different workplaces together.
And it's important to talk about in the first place what a union is. And, you know, essentially a union is people coming together to improve their conditions. And when you form a union, it gives you the right to negotiate your wages, benefits, and working conditions with the employer. It obligates them to negotiate things with you. Unions have a really awesome radical history, and I wish we had time to go way deeper into it, but that's its whole own thing. Unions, I think unions are awesome, and they look a lot of different ways, and they should. Every workplace is different, and you can bring a union together that represents the values and needs of your own workplace. And you can build on the shoulders of the long legacy of unions and also make it work for you and make it work for the current time. And times like now are sometimes more unique than others, but they can be unions can be really unique and specialized, and it's an amazing resource that we're so glad to have access to.
Yeah. Also, I forgot to say this earlier. If you have a question throughout, go ahead and just write it in the chat, and then one of the PZS moderators will collect those and we'll answer them at the end. So send questions whenever they come up. But yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about what a union does. So at its very base, a union's goal is to build collective power between workers at a workplace. It can do that through a variety of ways, such as advocating for workplace issues like discrimination, harassment, poor wages, dangerous working conditions. One of the tools for advocating is through collective bargaining. So one of the rights you gain when you become a union, when your workplace votes to unionize, is the right to collectively bargain. That essentially means a group of workers that are elected have to, or get to sit down with your employer. Your employer is obligated to come and talk through issues at the workplace, come to an agreement, and make a contract that the workplace has to follow. Some of the things in the contract can be like schedules for raise increases, protocols around safety, paid time off, but it gives workers way more of a level playing field in terms of power dynamic with the employer. And building that power inherently resists capitalist dynamics of wage labor and gives workers the power to have more control over what their workplace is like, which we feel unions are a really powerful anti-capitalist tool, and that it helps resist racial capitalism. So go unions.
So when your workplace votes to unionize, you gain a lot more rights and the landscape really shifts. But it's important to note that even before you unionize, you do have some legally protected rights under the National Labor Relations Act. Forming a union itself is a protected activity, and legally the company cannot retaliate against you, fire you, threaten you around forming a union. That said, it does happen in covert ways, and when you're in this process, it's important to document things that are going on, before your union is public. Like what are little things that are normal that might be, people are a few minutes late. Normally it's no big deal, and then all of a sudden people who are organizing become targets of harsh crackdowns in ways that other people aren't. Just all sorts of little things. You can really take advantage of the fact that that these are protected activities by documenting everything, and having ways to prove when people are being discriminated against. It can be a really helpful thing.
So a little bit more about what we've done, what our timeline has looked like. We began meeting in May 2019. We didn't start meeting until there had been a few of us that were really interested in unionizing, talked for like months, probably like 2 or 3 months, went to trainings, and then eventually got a crew of us that were really excited about forming a union. We had our first meeting in May 2019. We did a lot of the organizing stuff that we're about to talk about until February 2020, when we went public. Our union stopped being a secret in the workplace. We told the boss, we told the world. And then about a month later, we had our union vote and won at all 3 locations, which made us one of the first and only privately owned unionized preschools in the US, which is really exciting. childcare is a really like racialized and feminized field. So we really feel like it's really important to have organized labor in this field. So that's great. And now we're bargaining in the time of COVID. So we're bargaining over Zoom, over things that are happening right now. So stuff around layoff rights, sick leave, different safety things that are coming up. So we're a pretty new union in the grand scheme of things. And we're navigating the strange world of having created a union right before there were massive shutdowns in the state. So that's kind of where we're at and what we've worked on for the past like year and a half or so.
Yeah, so today, the stuff we're going to talk about, it's just kind of a crash course. We want to talk about just our own experiences, what it's been like in the year plus that we've been organizing. It's not going to reflect everybody's experiences, but hopefully it can be a cool starting off point. I'm really grateful for the things that we learned in trainings that we went to and things that mentors shared with us, and all the things people have shared with us in the networking we've been able to do. And if there's questions you have after this talk, you can always write us anytime. We're really happy to talk with people who are trying to get this stuff going and help you, connect you with resources and brainstorm things with you, especially if you are also childcare workers. We would love to talk with you. But really, anybody, especially having this experience organizing an unconventional field. And yeah, I suppose that's what I want to say here.
All right. So we are going to start off with talking about the early stages of unionizing, talking to your coworkers. So this is very beginning. You and some friends, you and some coworkers are like, this sucks, let's start a union. One of the first things that's really helpful to do is social mapping your workplace. It's essentially just looking at all of your coworkers and trying to understand what structures already exist, what social dynamics already exist, to help you get a picture of where are going to be strategic places to hear about, or what departments don't really hang out with other departments. Social mapping can be super fun. There are lots of different ways to do it. All you zinesters out there can get really creative about how you draw it and really think about it and visualize things. And it will also help you understand who hasn't been talked to, who's good to talk to who. You can draw based on relationships that already exist, friendships, who doesn't like each other. You can draw a spatial map. One thing we did is we like photocopied the fire exit or the like fire escape route from our locations and like drew in who was in what classrooms and who went where, to help understand like, oh, this person we don't know what their vibe is. This person goes into their classroom. Let's see if they can talk to them. So yeah, make sure you are capturing information like location, department, friendships, schedules, potential union support at this early stage when you're not really talking to people a lot about the union in particular. You can kind of vibe on their other politics or other things you know about them, and what informal leaders already exist, like who's scheduling the bowling nights, who brings in cake on birthdays, that type of thing.
Yeah, and with mapping, it's always important and fun to get creative there based on what your workplace looks like, but especially in a time now where a lot of workplaces are working remotely, things are new and confusing. Who knows what the structure is? You can try a bunch of different kinds of mapping. And
that's something I thought earlier, that you could do a map of which Slack channels people are in.
Yeah, that's a great idea. So, what was I going to say? Yes, so at a time like this, you can't roll out a giant piece of butcher paper and have like 5 people like with markers, you know, brainstorming. But you can figure out how you can map together. Something important to note is that power structures already exist in your workplace. If you are paying attention, you can already see who do people listen to, who do people respect, who, I mean, like Kate said, like who brings in the birthday cake, who coordinates fun things, and who do you feel skeptical of? So you want to be looking at those things. Who has influence, who is okay to tell, because I'm not sure if we emphasized this already, but in the beginning of your union effort, this is really something you do not want management and the ownership of your company to know about. This is a time for this to be really workers only, and there's a lot of reasons for that. But you want to be paying attention to who can you trust right now, and who do you want to wait to tell and why, and that will really help out. And as you get closer to later stages, it might be a safer time to tell more people, but play your cards carefully here.
So this is one example of a social map of a workplace. It's a really simplified one. Obviously, most workplaces are far larger than this, but it's just to like get an understanding of one example of how a map can look like. So here it has like who's friends, who's dating each other, who doesn't like each other, and who works closely together. And it can just help you get a picture of like, okay, what does this workplace look like? So you can see like, Peggy's really tight with a lot of people. Like Peggy's definitely someone you're going to want to have working closely with your union to help with that influence. Like Nancy is not tight with a lot of people, has an enemy, and is like close with management. Maybe Nancy is someone you want to have like wait a little longer and work more on building a relationship with Nancy before talking about the union. Again, this is just one example. You should be making lots and lots. Also, like these are really fun. It's fun to talk about your workplace and like who's there, but try to keep the gossip to a minimum as much as possible. Unions in the end are really to help workers come together and join together, not to separate people further. So really try and be discerning about which of these influence or which of these relationships are helpful for you to get an understanding of what your workplace looks like, and when are you just kind of getting into airing people's dirty laundry in a way that isn't super productive.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. There's definitely a difference between talking about what you know about people and what's important info versus what's kind of more petty and vicious. And hopefully with worker solidarity in mind, those distinctions will become more clear. That this really is about building genuine relationships in the workplace, even with people you might not be talking to otherwise. So drawing a map is super great and fun. And if you don't love to draw or whatever, you can go with a spreadsheet. But either way, you're gonna want to have a spreadsheet. A spreadsheet is gonna end up being your best friend with this process. It's even if you start super simple, like this is an example spreadsheet. Perhaps you can tell. These are some basic categories that you might not have all the answers off the top of your head. If you're like, how many people even work at my job? It takes a minute to sit down and figure that out, especially if you have multiple locations. But if you can start to have this stuff all in a spreadsheet and you know that this is something you can return to, you can add new information you get into it. If you're organizing with more people, they can add to it. This will really help you in the end. Having the contact information goes a long way. And a spreadsheet will end up helping you in ways that you don't even know when you first make it. So I really recommend a spreadsheet as a central thing that you keep with. Also, it might end up feeling like it's kind of sensitive information. So I mean, you can think about that. What kind of stuff are you putting in here that maybe shouldn't be seen by a lot of people? Maybe it shouldn't go in there. who knows? You'll be able to figure that out based on what your organizing structure looks like.
All right, and one really important thing throughout the whole process of unionizing and in those initial conversations with your coworkers is identifying grievances. Grievances are basically any issue in the workplace that people want to see changed. So grievances can be things about what the raise schedule is, how time off is, like allocated discrimination that happens, lack of benefits, like the break room smelling bad. Anything that is frustrating to your coworkers is a grievance that you want to be paying attention to. So similar to there already being like social and leadership structure in your workplace, there are already frustrations and challenges in your workplace, and you want to be a really good listener in hearing what those already are. And you also want to be kind of active with agitating your coworkers around helping reinforce that we deserve better as employees, and we shouldn't have to deal with the issues that are coming up. Also, think about the patterns that exist in your grievances. This is one of the ways that the social mapping will come in handy. If you start to notice that like all of the closers have the same grievance, that's really important to notice and to think about. If you know all the grievances of the closers, we haven't really heard from the openers, you should probably talk to the openers and see, because they probably have specific grievances too. So make sure that when you're thinking about grievances, you're thinking about a broad range of what different grievances for different positions or people can be. And these conversations with the agitation and the talking are really helpful for starting to build strong relationships in your workplace. So collective power is also super relational. So these relationships are going to be really helpful as you move forward with your unionization of getting some worker cohesion, getting workers to really care about each other. And then also these grievances are probably what's going to guide what you bargain for in your first contract. So we're bargaining for our first contract right now. And some of the things we're really pushing for are the things we talked about right at the beginning of unionizing. So this is where your spreadsheet comes in handy of writing things down. Make sure you're taking notes about what grievances are and be a really good listener in hearing these issues.
Yeah, so these conversations you're having with your coworkers are really the backbone of this whole thing. The whole point is building worker power, coming together to do what you can do together that you cannot do alone in the boss's office. And it's a great thing. So, you know, this isn't, you're not like sneaking in to manipulate your coworkers into believing in unions or anything like that. This is about building genuine relationships to come together and build something together. So like we said before, in the early stages, this is, it's a relatively secretive process. It's for the workers to know about, not management, not bosses. Even if you think they'd be sympathetic to your cause, now's not the time. So in building these genuine relationships with people, and like Kate said, being a really good listener to hear like what are people really saying is awesome. There are ways to feel this kind of thing out and to know that there's, as you're building these relationships and, you know, you're just talking to your coworkers in general, you don't have to come in super strong talking about the union because this, in some ways it's a long game. You can feel people out. You know, you can share some of your concerns and complaints and feel out how they react. Talk about unions in a broad sense, either, you know, other places that have unionized or family history of unions or whatever. But something I think is really important to note is you don't want to be probably the type of coworker who's just complaining all the time. And, you know, people pay attention to who is a good coworker, who's a helpful hard worker, who you can count on, who you know, has good worker solidarity, and who's not just complaining about things all the time. So that's something I notice in workplace organizing, is that organizers can like become better coworkers. And so, yeah, while you can feel things out by sharing your own concerns and complaints, yeah, again, don't just go in to all these conversations blazing about everything that's horrible with the company, because probably people's opinions on the company are more nuanced than that.
Yeah. And I think also on that note, like when you're thinking about the agitating that you're doing with your coworkers and the listening, you really want to hype people up on their concerns and focus less on yours. So if someone's saying like, oh, they didn't approve my PTO again, just being like, oh my God, I can't believe that. That's so fucked up. Like, you really deserve better. Really make sure it's focused on the person you're talking to rather than yourself. So it doesn't kind of turn into what Nat was talking about of the like, meh. Yeah. We're going to talk about building your organizing committee or your OC. Your organizing committee is essentially the group of people who has been pushing for a union to exist. So this is likely you and whichever coworkers were the ones who were first like, you know what, we should really have a union. It makes sense to start small, especially in this early stages when you're being really careful about who knows, and builds from there. You want to make sure that it is trusted people from a variety of different positions and shifts and identities and locations if that's relevant. So similar to the grievances of wanting to make sure you have a clear picture of different things that happen in the workplace, you also want to make sure that you have good representation on your organizing committee of different things people might experience. So, you know, if you work in a racially diverse workplace and your organizing committee is all white, you need to be really thinking about that and thinking about those power structures. Similarly, like we work in a workplace where there are almost no men. If our organizing committee was only men, we would need to really look at that and be like, what the heck? And also on your organizing committee, same with what we were just talking about, you want to make sure that your organizing committee is made up of people who are going to be showing up consistently at the job and being good coworkers and being a friend to your coworkers.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Like this unionizing process, at least for us, is about upsetting power structures that exist naturally in the workplace, that, you know, can look like all, you know, white supremacy, all kinds of things. Work is complicated and fraught, and the way things shake out really sucks a lot of the time. And so if you are coming together to advocate for each other, you can really upset some of the patterns that exist. And something to note here too is that people are going to have different amounts of availability for organizing. And you know, maybe some people have kids, they feel like they can't make the meetings, or maybe you accidentally are scheduling meetings at bad times. Like, pay attention to making the organizing committee an accessible thing. And if people are not available to plug into it, you know, just make sure you're keeping them in the loop and doing what you can to make it accessible. Research. So in these early stages, as you know, you're building your spreadsheet, you're finding out more about your coworkers, maybe you're finding out more about other locations. You also want to understand your workplace. Obviously, it's in some workplaces, people know exactly how it's structured. They know the owner knows their name. Other places, it's not like that at all. But either way, you want to understand who owns your company, who's in charge, who is calling the shots, and yeah, what's the setup? Definitely have a clear vision of the way power is organized at the administrative management levels. Something that was super helpful for us was creating a Google Drive. So I had to learn how to do that, and I don't regret it. Super helpful. I love Google products forever now. But we have this Google Drive where we just started being able to put everything in one place. And I love that, you know, you can be careful about who it's shared with, because, you know, some things are more sensitive than others. But You can keep all kinds of things in there, your meeting notes. Once you start having meetings, it just comes in so handy to have everything organized and not have notes as like little pieces of paper that get lost in someone's backpack or something like that. And research is also about building your skills and knowledge about what unions are and what they can do. We were really confused when we started, and we went to trainings when we could. There's amazing training resources in Portland on unionizing. For example, this organization called Labor Notes that has trainings, and I think we'll try to send out info on upcoming trainings somehow after this. But they've just been so helpful in those trainings. You know, you can meet other people who are in their early stages or people with decades of experience who can network you with all kinds of people. I can't even stress how helpful going to trainings was in all kinds of ways. We built relationships that are still really strong to this day.
Middle stages. So you've talked to your coworkers, you have kind of a picture of what your workplace looks like and heard some grievances. Now what? Nat, will you change the slide? It's good to start thinking about creating some more clear internal structure for your organizing committee. So likely by this time it started to grow beyond the first like 3, 4, 5 people. You're growing it intentionally. So you want to make a clear structure to easily invite in more people and to have some like consistency and sustainability within your organizing committee. So think about what your decision making structure is going to be, what can be made by an individual, what needs to be made by the organizing committee, what needs to be made by the entire workplace. So things like, do you want to have telling a new person about the union be up to someone's own discretion, or do you want it to be a group conversation? And then for thinking about what needs to be made by the organizing committee, what needs to be made by the whole workplace. Obviously, that isn't a decision that will be happening at this stage because not everyone knows yet. But it's really good to starting to think about those things early on to have some idea of what that structure looks like beforehand. So knowing that, like, you know, you're not going to strike unless your entire workplace is excited about that and thinking about what those structures want to be. Also solidifying meeting roles and meeting times and how to rotate them to make sure no one gets burned out and things are shared fairly. We have the kind of standard meeting roles of like facilitator, note taker, speakers list taker. Those are really helpful. And then create subcommittees as you need them once you get to the size and the workload that feels appropriate. At this point in our process, we had a communications working group, which was working on getting like written guides for things or like pamphlets ready. Some of them using at that time, some of them in the wings for when we did go public membership, which was really bottom lining those conversations with coworkers and then going public. We started prepping for going public pretty early on to make sure we had all of our ducks in a little row. So that it's helpful to create some structure to have clarity and help people fold in more easily.
Yeah, I loved when we were able to start really structuring the work and break it up into little groups. It really allowed people to be involved to whatever level they had space for. You know, whether someone had space to be, you know, organizing committee member and taking on other stuff. Maybe they didn't. You don't want to scare people away by making the workload too intensely. And once we started being able to rotate meeting roles, it really made a huge difference too, and engaged more people, kind of challenged people to take on roles they might have been scared to otherwise. And everybody built lots of skills. It really, really helps spread around the work because people are working so hard and trying to start a union. It's a lot. I want to just touch on the idea of parent unions. When we started, we thought, well, when we started, we were learning a lot, and we thought that we would be, that we could just start our own union as its own entity, just from the ground up. And that's really what we wanted to do. We didn't want to have another union come in and tell us how we had to do things and, you know, take control, whatever. But we started to learn about how not partnering with another union meant you have to do all kinds of legal stuff that you might not have experience with, all kinds of like writing bylaws and things just totally from scratch. And we were so lucky to end up working with ILWU Local 5, which, like Kate said before, was started by Powell's Books workers and just represents people in a lot of more like feminized professions. ILWU, so rad, and they're not about top-down control. They're about working with you to grow from the ground up and like creating your structures from the bottom up. So we were so excited when we ended up in the situation where we're still getting to make our own decisions, drive our own ship, and then all of a sudden we have these amazing mentors and all these amazing networks and resources that are being shared with us in working with ILWU and some other unions. It's like we're getting full support from them without paying any dues until we have a union contract. Everyone who has their contracts and are paying their union dues are kind of paying it forward for new workplaces to be supported. So it can be an amazing process to find a parent union to partner with. Make sure when you're doing this to talk to unions about or talk to the people involved, talk to the representatives about their values and structures and politics. You know, people have a lot of different values and unions are structured a lot of different ways. So don't be afraid to really interrogate that. And maybe you're working in a profession that has a lot of unions, maybe you're not. We didn't have any preschool unions to look at. That's just not a thing, hardly. So we really had to figure out who we wanted to work with.
Also, looking at public statements from unions is a really good way to get kind of a sense of what they're like, seeing what actions they've participated in, what issues they've taken a stance on, that type of thing. House calls and pledge cards. So this is really one of the most concrete first steps towards going public that you're going to be doing in this stage of unionizing. House calls are essentially a time when one worker sits down from the organizing committee, sits down with someone, one of your other coworkers, likely with someone from your parent union, to get specific information about their grievances, their questions about the union, things like that. And one of the goals of the house call is to have someone sign a pledge card. A pledge card is something that you need from, at bare minimum, 30% of your workplace. It's basically a signed document from your coworkers saying, I want our workplace to have a vote about unionizing. The legal requirement is 30% of the workplace. The rule of thumb is you want 70% of your workplace to sign a pledge card. That's because when you actually have the vote, you need 50% plus one to vote yes to have a union. Technically, pledge cards, you're saying you want to have a vote, you're not saying you're pro-union. Most of the time, people sign it if they're pro-union. So in these house calls, it's really important to have open conversations with people about what their specific issues are. Like we said, conversations about issues are the backbone of unionizing. So we're going to do that again. In this setting, it's helpful because you have someone from your parent union there who might be able to answer more questions about unions more broadly. And also people might share more openly outside of a workplace or a group environment about what their grievances are. You want to do house calls starting from the most union support to the least, because the house call process is leading up to going public. So you really want to keep your riskier people as close to going public as possible. This is what we had for our pledge card. You can make them look however you want. You have to have the like little text in the middle needs to be the same essentially, except with the name of your workplace and that type of thing. But the rest you can make look however you want. We are early childhood educators, so we thought it would be fun to have something relevant to our field. So we made it a cute little crayon. We had a lot of good feedback about it. I think it made something that can seem like kind of a scary, stuffy legal document more cute. It also really helped show people that like we're not some weird rabble rousers trying to destroy the workplace. Like we're teachers, like we want to have a good workplace and it's not some outside party. Yeah, have a fun pledge card.
Yeah, it can also show, you know, silly things like this can also show you are, you know, you really are in charge of what you're doing. There's no scary third party being like, this is serious, you got to have your whatever. So, so preparing workers, ideally at this stage in organizing, the company doesn't know that you are planning unionizing in a really serious way. But regardless, you need to be prepared for the possibility that the workplace could engage in an anti-union campaign. Most companies, by far, don't want their workers to unionize. You know, they know that that means that they're going to have to negotiate with you. They're not going to have all their power anymore. They might think that that they're doing a great job. They might think that they're listening to you, even, you know, when you're asking for things that you're just not getting, as you know, for years and years. But either way, they have a lot. A lot of companies have a lot to gain from not sharing their power with you. So even if you feel like they're really cool, they might be sympathetic or something, you as organizers have to be prepared for them to try to squash your union campaign. And with that, preparing workers for that possibility is really important. Ideally, the workers, your fellow workers, hear about the union from people who are involved in the organizing and who are knowledgeable about the organizing effort, as opposed to hearing it like weird rumors from the employer or like lies. This is also a place where building those genuine relationships with your coworkers goes a really long way, because hopefully they hear something weird or they feel freaked out or whatever, they can come to you or one of the other people who's super in the loop and say, I heard this, what's up with that? And not, and if you haven't built these relationships, maybe people won't be asking you those questions. So yeah, often this process is called inoculation, and you're helping inoculate everyone against the possibility that anti-union sentiment could totally knock out your support. Hopefully everybody's in the loop enough to move forward.
All right, note-taking. Note-taking is needed throughout this whole process. Your spreadsheet's a form of note-taking. You're wanting to take notes on grievances, but particularly for house calls, you want to take really clear notes because it's such a unique time to specifically talk one-on-one with people. Keep track of who's pro the union, keep track of who's not sure, and definitely keep track of anyone who might be against that you didn't expect. And also, if things come up in your house calls, if they have questions that you don't know the answer to, that's totally fine. Just make sure to take a note on it and follow up with them really quickly when you get the answer. Talk to your union reps, talk to other people to try and figure it out, or put them in touch with someone who you think might have the answer. Follow through is really important to make sure that people know that you are someone who they can trust. and continue to update your workplace grievances to make sure that they're as consistent as possible and comprehensive as possible.
Okay, so here we are approaching the later stage of this organizing. It's going public. This is when the public and your company finds out about what you've been doing. There's a lot you can do to prepare, and you can think about who you can work with, whether there are organizations you are connected to or who you want to be connected to. Clientele of your work could be good allies. In our case, that's the parents and families at the school, and of course other unions. So it's likely, I mean, we'll talk more about this, but it's likely that you're going to want to keep this secret from most other groups, and maybe confide in a couple that you trust, but you can be prepared to, when you go public, have letters that you're sending out asking for support from organizations, whether that's like asking them to also post on social media or just like filling them in about what's going on. Have we'll press release ready, have stuff ready, so when you go public, it can be a big thing. It's not like you're public and then you scramble to try to like explain yourself. So this picture we have here is a pizza party we had that we planned for the weekend after we went public. It was so, we went public on a Monday. We promoted this pizza party all week where parents and families of the kids at our school could come to Mississippi Pizza, to hang out, eat pizza, and ask questions about the union directly to union organizers. And it was so fun. Like, we had music and all kinds of stuff, and it was packed. And I think the parents felt really excited that they were included. So it really depends on what field you're in, whether this is going to be relevant to you. But it's not a great thing to have clientele that feel scared of what you're doing or feel against it. Hopefully everyone can see that this can benefit everyone, and building those relationships are super crucial.
Yeah, and you can also like make a Facebook and have it not public and just ready to go. And like, we had the event for that, like ready to go. Like, we just had everything. So you just needed to press a button so that the first week we could just like boom, boom, boom. Another thing that's important is reaching out to solidarity organizations. So a lot of orgs that you might not have as much of a relationship with, you're going to be telling them after you go public, but it's important to think about some orgs that you trust, that you can tell a little early, whether or not in name. Some orgs we told that we were a local preschool that was unionizing, and we didn't tell them which one. So research other unions in your area and also other organizations that work with similar values or towards similar goals. Universal Preschool Now is on here. They're an org that we linked up with really early on. We both work in early childhood education, but for different things. Universal Preschool Now is a group that has been working towards a ballot measure by the same name for free preschool for 3 to 5 year olds in Multnomah County and an $18 minimum wage for workers. So we have a lot of shared goals and different areas. So it was really great to work with them really close on. And also it's a great place to look to your parent union. If you're not sure where to start, they'll have a lot of really great guidance on which orgs are important to link up with or which orgs are trustworthy to have that support.
The big question is, how do you go public? There's so many different ways to do it, but it's nerve-wracking telling your boss if this is what you've been working up to this whole time. This traditional phrase of marching on the boss, it's kind of people get up from the machines and storm into the boss's office and say, we want a union. It's kind of the cartoon of it. But this can look many different ways. This is just about your boss and the public finding out about this. Depending on what kind of place you work in, there might be an easy time where all your coworkers are together and you can just do this together in a public way. You might all have totally different shifts, or you might work at a bunch of different locations. So you can get creative about this. We waited for a day where we weren't responsible for children, a training day, and because you can't just like leave the kids or take the kids with you or whatever. So it was a training day, no kids. We prepared a statement to read, and at the same time at 3 different locations, read it out loud, and it felt like a really empowering process for everyone who was there, and it was really direct and just like we are doing this. Another way that people have done it is, for example, planning a rally where you can invite the public, whether you keep it anonymous, kind of like what Kate said about how we told people we're a preschool, but we didn't, who's gonna need this support, but not who. You could gather people for a rally under that kind of anonymous pretense, anonymous, whatever. But anyway, writing a collective statement, really powerful. You don't have to get in the weeds of like what's wrong, and it doesn't have to be aggressive or anything. I'm sure there's plenty of guidance that you can get from unions you're working with or people who have experience about how you want to do this. And it really depends on your situation. Maybe there is some like really bad stuff going on that you are, needing to blow out of the water or something. But I think a great strategy is being like, this is what we're doing. This is why we're stoked about it. And we're moving forward here. So it's gonna be up to you, but this is the big moment where things change, and it's no longer a secret, and the rest goes on from there. So this is a picture from the day we went public. We had planned a thing for after work, a bar that's was open to all ages. I think we had a couple coworkers under 21. So we made sure it was accessible for everybody, where we could come together after work and celebrate. And a bunch of the people did come out, which was super cool. And I love this picture. Everybody was so stoked and full of possibility. It was such a relief and so exciting.
Yeah, also just to note, ongoing public, you generally go public once you get that 70% of pledge cards, and the day you go public is around the same day that you turn in the pledge cards to the National Labor Relations Board, which triggers your move towards a vote. But yeah, once you go public, it's super important to continue connecting the membership with the organizing committee, especially since based on your assessments of who would be against the union, there are likely people who didn't know about the union until you went public. So you really want to make sure that you are hitting the ground running with keeping those communications going. There are going to be lots of questions. Make sure you're very open. We did that through a few different means. We've been having membership meetings every month since we went public. We had the first one like within a week of going public to talk about what was going to happen next, to answer questions. Also socials. Since COVID, we've had like a categories game. There have also been like park hangouts, like distance park hangouts for different locations. And we also have a Facebook group that we actually had before we went public for people who knew. And now it's really good for people to talk to each other, ask questions, and to like update about things that are happening or like events that are happening. Also, at all of our membership meetings, we have like a get to know, like meet a local 5 person to make sure that the connection between our parent union and our union is open and clear. and continue to make your organizing committee structure really clear, and help it be understood that people are welcome to join. And with that structure, also making clear the level of commitment that it is, since it's likely a fair amount of meetings, and point people to different ways to engage that are different levels of commitment, whether it's like taking on one specific task where it's like once a month you put up this poster, or whether it's like the full-fledged thing, or wherever in between. And all of these things are really helpful for keeping anti-union narratives challenged, and making sure people can see that unions are led by the workers, and that if the workplace wouldn't be fighting unions so hard unless they felt like they had power to lose. So knowing that that it's led by the workers and led in with true goals is really helpful.
Yeah, we also made sure that we got like weekly member newsletter happening, that we would print out for the staff rooms and also send out over email. And I think right at the beginning we also started our parent and families newsletter, so that and similarly, you know, people hear it from us first. And make t-shirts and buttons, and had t-shirt days where teachers would all, I think, wear shirts on Fridays. And it really was amazing, because people who felt unsure about the union, they're like, oh my gosh, all of my coworkers are wearing these t-shirts. You know, you don't have to talk about it, you can just see it. You can also talk about it. Voting. So when you're going public, most likely, like Kate said, you have or are about to give your pledge cards to the National Labor Relations Board, and that's what puts the wheels in motion to have this vote, yes or no, on unionizing. It's often about a month after you go public, and so that month is a really crucial time to keep up the hype, build support, and like we said before, to be aware that there might be an anti-union campaign from the company, whether it's really in your face and aggressive, or whether it's really covert and subtle. This is the real time. You know, in your union journey, like, support's going to ebb and flow. All kinds of things could happen, but this vote is the numbers. This is, you need just over 50% of people to vote. Well, not of all workers, but of the people who vote, you need over 50% to vote yes. Otherwise, you have to wait another year until you can vote again on the union. So this really matters, having the support and really keeping people in the loop and being available to answer people's questions if they start to get scared, hear scary things, whatever. You want to continue to do those house calls for people who didn't know, or who you never had time to, you know, nail down a time to sit down with them and a member of your parent union. Right now, that's going to look like Zoom, probably, maybe. But having these one-on-one meetings are just worth their weight in gold. And like Kate said, events to keep people engaged. This is the perfect time.
Yay! You won your election. Woo! What's next? So after you win your election, you gain even more rights as organizers in the workplace than you had before. So before, you were protected from discrimination and harassment for workplace organizing. Now, in addition to that, you also have the right to negotiate your wages, benefits, and working conditions through collective bargaining. So collective bargaining, like we talked about earlier, is when there's an elected group of workers from your workplace who sit down and regularly negotiate with the company over issues. That is one way of bringing power to the workplace. There are lots of other ways that happen through bottom-up power, more informal structures, but one of the most important formal legal structures is collective bargaining. In addition to the right to bargain, you also gain the right to union representation in Weingarten situations. Weingarten situations are basically any situation where there is an investigation from the employer that could reasonably lead to disciplinary action of an employee. In those situations, you have the right to union representation throughout that whole process. Someone, either a steward from your job if you're at that point, or someone from your parent union to represent you and advocate for your rights. So those are some of the structural legal rights you gain when you win your union vote.
You're, like Kate said, a super important thing that you're gaining is the right to bargain for your contract and for any changes in working conditions. The company is now obligated to involve you in those decisions, which is a huge shift. And as I'm sure you can imagine, has been really cool to win those rights right before COVID hit. Anyway, creating your bargaining team is also an opportunity to engage workers more because they are electing, like all workers together are electing this team. You can open nominations. People can nominate any worker they want. They can nominate themselves. It's a really cool thing to involve everyone. We started nominations for our bargaining team election before we even won our vote because we're like, we're public, act like a union, we're gonna win this thing. And you can decide your own structure. There's nothing that's mandating how many people you need. Decide what makes sense. And yeah, that's Kate, are you there?
Sorry, I was taking an eating break.
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to make sure.
And you can do your votes online too. So now, did you say that, Nat?
I didn't, yeah.
Yeah, you can do your vote online. We can check with our union rep what website this was, but there's a website because union nominations and votes are also a legal part of the bargaining team process. So there's like a secure NLRB, National Labor Relations Board approved website that you can have your votes happen online. So if you're employed somewhere that is working remotely, you can still do those votes remotely.
Yeah, so while your vote that's yes or no on the union is a lot more structured, that's like someone from the NLRB comes down, it's like this whole thing. I'm not exactly sure how it's happening right now during COVID times. I think they've figured something out, but your bargaining team election can be a lot more casual.
But you can mail in pledge cards.
Yes.
There is structure for pledge cards right now.
Do you know if there's been any update about the actual votes?
I'll check. I don't know.
Okay. We'll get back to you.
Will you go to the next slide? Yeah, okay. So that is essentially the span of unionizing that we're gonna cover. After you start bargaining, it's a whole new different stage of union organizing. That's the stage we're in and navigating right now. We've been bargaining for a few months. It's still super important to build solidarity with your coworkers, keep fighting for fair conditions, and especially now. And again, we know that this is a lot of information. We really wanted to make something that was kind of a skeletal roadmap of what unionizing can look like to help you get a clear picture as you get started. But we know that there's so much more nitty gritty. Like Nat was talking about, trainings are so important. Labor notes, secrets of a successful organizer. IWW has a workplace organizing 101 training that's really great. So keep learning, but definitely just remember, talking to your coworkers, that is always the thing. Just keep talking to your coworkers, and we really hope this was helpful.
Yeah, we just have a couple more slides here, and then we're going to get to our Q&A, which I'm excited about. And to repeat, if you have questions, feel free to send them into Zine to Sabine. So where we are now, again, some of us are working on site and some of us are laid off. We were lucky to negotiate for a situation where people did not have to come back if they were not feeling safe coming back. And I feel really strongly that that is extremely important. So that's where we are now, but anyone who's laid off is still a member of the union. And that's something to note when you're organizing right now, is that can be true. So we're bargaining for our first contract and over some working conditions over Zoom. That's the new normal right now. Most people are negotiating over Zoom. And in some ways, it's really convenient for people, but yeah, things are changing.
Yeah, we didn't talk about as much as I think we hoped when we initially made this proposal about what unionizing right now looks like, but we definitely want to just talk about and acknowledge that, like, this is a really new world to start a union, but an incredibly important one and an incredibly important time to build worker power, and knowing that there are definitely new challenges right now and some things that could be new advantages. So thinking about, you know, if your workplace is distant right now, people are more afraid of job security, like those are really real challenges. And also people are the fucked upness of the like capitalist wage system is so much more laid bare right now. And I think people have a much stronger understanding of how workers are exploited, especially the lowest paid workers, in seeing how disproportionately lower paid workers and Black workers are getting sick. Knowing that surveillance might look different. If you're all on Zoom, your boss might see you more. And also with the global uprisings, people have a way stronger understanding of how pervasive anti-Blackness is in our world. And we also really hope people understand how much anti-Blackness shows up structurally in the workplace and in specifically different fields, and knowing that labor organizing should be anti-oppressive and that labor organizing should be anti-racist, and labor organizing should be against white supremacy. And we are a very new union, so we definitely don't have all the answers. We were really speaking from our own experience in this, from things we've learned from our mentors, from trainings, from reading, but we're hoping to share our experience and that it's helpful, and we're also hoping to learn with y'all and think through things together, because it's a really new time and it's an exciting time, and it's a time when there are a lot of questions, but we're excited to dig in and hopefully build worker power together. And I hope some of y'all want to unionize your workplace and that you'll email us.
Yeah, definitely. Please feel free to be in touch. We're really excited about sharing what we've learned and also helping people brainstorm how to move forward. I want to just reaffirm, unions are about changing the power structures in your workplace. That is what they're about. And if you, and one way that you can advocate for your coworkers who might be in more marginalized positions than you are, is to listen to them and figure out how do you want to advocate for their rights, and maybe a union could be part of how you do that. Okay, I'm very excited to maybe answer a few questions. Thank you so much.
Are there questions in there?
Thank you so much. That was absolutely wonderful. And as a former Powell's employee, I'm really glad to hear that ILWU is in support of y'all. They're the best. I have a bunch of great questions. We've got about 20 minutes or so, and I'm just going to read them in the order received. And because of the way my eyeballs are, I'm going to get really close to my camera to do it. So here we go. Enjoy my eyebrow. Okay, and feel free to send more questions into the chat. We may or may not get to all of them, but we're going to get going. So the first question that I have is, can unions benefit part-time staff, possibly allowing more full-time positions, and the benefits that are given to full-time staff only? So I guess this would be in situations where folks are in a workplace where benefits differ between part-time and full-time.
Yeah.
So if I read your question and you want to clarify something, feel free to message me again and we can unmute you.
They totally can. One of the things we're bargaining for, we don't have our contract, so all the bargaining is not set in stone. But one of the things we're bargaining for right now is better benefits for part-time employees, because our workplace is one of the ones where it's like full-time employees get these, part-time employees get like this. So it's definitely something that's really commonly bargained for. And yeah, when we were talking about the like talking to people in different positions, full-time, part-time is like a really important one to like make sure you hear the grievances from different positions. Because one thing in our workplace too is there are a lot of people who want to be part-time but aren't allowed to or don't because they would lose those benefits.
Yeah, we've had a lot of people over time quit because they can't have the part-time schedules they want. Yeah, it's a really cool thing about bargaining is you can figure out what's important to you and move forward with those. And while we've been bargaining, we've been able to send out surveys that have been super helpful. We write whatever questions we want and whatever is important. And we just sent out a benefits survey recently and got a bunch of information about what's working for people and what's not working for people. And that can inform what we ask for.
Yep. Thank you. So the next question I have is, does working for a nonprofit affect anything? What about if staff have been furloughed indefinitely? I imagine that means like if someone is attempting to unionize a nonprofit workplace, does it work differently?
You can definitely unionize a nonprofit. I'm not sure about the furlough situation. If you want, I changed my name to the email. If you want to email us, I can connect you to our union rep to talk more about what it means for furloughed employees.
I'm going to put that email address in the chat to everyone. So if you are like me and it's hard to see that, great. Okay. Sorry, go ahead and keep speaking.
No, that's all. Yeah. I think it's tight to organize nonprofits. I think it's really cool to see how people have a stronger understanding of how people who work in like care fields. I think in preschool, we get a lot of similar narratives to nonprofits of like, you don't do it for the money, you do it because you love it, like that type of thing. When, you know, helping make sure people are okay shouldn't be something that like workers are drained for. And I'm having a hard time thinking of examples, but there are definitely nonprofits that have had union campaigns.
Yeah, I think an important thing to note there is I think a lot of nonprofits tend to be more on the side of like, we're awesome, we're social justice influenced, you know, and or like, how dare you do anything to you know, mess us up. But we actually really believe that every worker deserves a union, I don't think there's ever a good excuse for union busting. And so with every worker deserving a union, there's always more that you can ask for and that's needed. A union doesn't mean the company has to give you everything you want and you can just ask for unreasonable things. It means it means the company is obligated to sit down with the workers and make decisions together.
All right, so our next question, did you have any friction with other locations being lukewarm about unionizing, having strong loyalty to quote unquote the boss, or et cetera?
Yeah, so we had a really hard time getting in touch with, I think, well, most of us who were organizing were at one location, and it was really hard to figure out how to get in touch with the other locations when this was a thing that needed to be really secretive. And there were some really cool things that worked in our favor, but it was hard, and especially, you know, not really knowing who you can trust or what the situation looks like. Luckily, we've actually had really awesome support from the 2 locations that were not the original like hotspots, and we've actually had a little more friction at the at the hotspot location, but it's been awesome. We were so worried that we were not going to be able to organize all 3 locations, and when we had our union vote, we just won by a landslide. Like one of the other locations had 100% yes votes on the union, and it was just, I mean, obviously we all screamed. It was incredible. So we worked really hard to build those relationships, and keeping in mind that if people feel left out and feel out of the loop, that's a dangerous thing. And you can't manage that perfectly, but you can try your best to advocate, to make sure people feel like this is for them. And we're still, it's never going to be perfect. We're still working on that. And yeah, I don't know. Kate, do you have anything else?
Yeah, I think definitely around the kind of separation of our center, which is the largest and where kind of the Union Drive started, and the other 2, one thing that was helpful was having like location specific like hangouts with each center before we went public. Because one thing we were running into a lot is like people would be like, oh yeah, sounds cool, and then like having a hard time moving towards like bigger engagement. And I think it makes sense, people at one center all know each other. There's already social dynamics. It's hard to ask one person to be like, hey, come into this like huge group dynamic. Like, so having people, with like our union rep and one person from the organizing committee, and then the rest of the people from the other group really did a lot for helping kind of the social separation. Also, in terms of just like friction more broadly, I think from the nature of our workplace, like our school, like really openly talks about like prioritizing social justice and really wanting to like having like anti-biased educational curriculum. So I think by the nature of who that job attracts, I think we had a lot easier of a time than other places with our coworkers being more readily pro-union. So just naming that like our situation might not be the same as everyone. We don't have as much experience with really strong anti-union campaigns from coworkers than other people have. So yeah, again, email us if you want, and we can definitely connect you to other shops that do have more experience with strong anti-union campaigns to get to talk more about that.
Awesome. The next question is, what advice would you share for a larger company, like more than 200 employees, that continue to spread misinformation and/or anti-union sentiments among employees, or present a non-union status, like erasure of organizing in their company to customers and the public? And obviously you touched on that a little bit, that's kind of not been y'all's experience, but any other thoughts that you might have on that are welcome.
Would whoever, so is that for a place that's already public then, for the erasure of organizing?
And if the person who wrote that has any desire to speak and elaborate on that, that would be just
Someone waving.
Hi, I'm Emily.
Hi,
I believe they have a union already and they are public, but it's one location and one specific type of worker within the company. So it's a specific kind of union. And I speak from experience because I was employed there. Yeah, just wondering. I know it's completely not a simple question, but
no, yeah, I mean,
so much also. I really appreciate all of your answers so far. They're really informative.
oh, thank you. Yeah, I mean, again, I think that's not something we have a ton of experience with, being so newly public and having a unique anti-union situation. But I think just in terms of having things be visual is really helpful. So I don't know if the workplace has like put up posters in the break room or given out pamphlets or things like that. I think also we've had success with having like socials for answering things, because we do the membership meetings, which are a little more formal, and also socials. But I think the socials are better in terms of like kind of being able to like be a pebble in the rumor mill of kind of disrupting, like, you know, if you get people shit talking and then you're able to like be there and be like, oh, actually that's not true, then it can kind of help. But yeah, I that's not from personal experience at all, so I don't, yeah, best of luck, I guess. And again, email and we can connect you with people who hopefully have more concrete answers.
Yeah, and in terms of just companies that are really big, that's somewhere that where mapping can come in super handy. Where, I mean, it can be really hard to connect with workers who are, so it really depends on the structure of the workplace, but who are on different shifts or different floors, or just like never work together, or doing completely separate kinds of work. But if you can make strong connections in with people who are kind of spread out, often like those little pods can be really helpful, especially if you're talking to people who kind of who people kind of listen to. But it's not easy. But actually, labor notes trainings do talk a lot about that kind of thing. And the book Secrets of a Successful Organizer, which those trainings are based on, is really super helpful.
Thank you, and thanks, Emily. All right, and the last question that I have in the chat for right now, so if anyone else has questions, you can send them. Are y'all involved in the push for universal preschool in Portland? Any thoughts on how that initiative would affect your union?
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah. So yeah, we had their little logo on one of our slides, as like, they're like, I'm so grateful to them. We've been working really closely with people involved in that campain. The whole
They knew about our
time.
union like 6 months before we went public.
Yeah, they had the secrets, and actually ended up being super helpful in connecting us to people at one of the other locations that we were having trouble with. So it's awesome to connect with other people in the same struggle. But yes, universal preschool now is incredible. And if you've heard about it, maybe you know, they just succeeded in collecting 32,000 handwritten signatures during COVID times in 5 weeks. I literally didn't think it was possible, and I'm so happy. But I guess to answer the question, that the way that it's structured, they looked for a lot of actual worker input in creating the ballot measure, which is how I plugged in the first place. And so there's a really great minimum wage. Our actually ILW Local 5, like through our union partners, we were able to actually write some union neutrality language into the ballot measure, where if schools want to qualify for the funding, they have to meet certain criteria, like the minimum wage, not running anti-union campaigns, and a few other things. So actually, the Universal Preschool campaign and our unionizing goes super well hand in hand. They're all about worker rights and accessibility in this field.
Awesome. I have another question. I'm curious about how worker turnover affects unionization efforts. I'm a grad student, and a majority of our workers turn over either every 2 years or others turn over every 5 to 7 years.
Yeah, worker turnover is huge. Definitely in our field, it's something that came up a lot. I think one thing that we found is once unionization started, it kept people there longer. It sounds like as a grad student, that might not be a structural possibility. I wonder if y'all have connected, if you have connected to the Graduate Employees Union at PSU. I know they formed fairly recently, I think in like 2015 maybe, but they probably have a lot of structure around how that turnover looks. But I definitely think even after people leave, the kind of like felt legacy of whatever organizing or like agitation or solidarity that happened is really real. So even if you don't know what your structure will look like for turnover. Like you can still start having those conversations about grievances and start building kind of worker connection. Because, you know, if you start having a monthly happy hour, maybe even if you leave, that happy hour will still be happening and those worker connections can still happen.
Yeah, I'm thinking about how when we first started organizing, things were kind of all over the place in terms of our organization. What I mean is once we really dialed things in about how we were structured, how meetings would go, what kind of connection we were doing, and especially with having socials, like once I got to the point where I was like, wow, if I just disappeared tomorrow, this would just keep going, like without me. That was a really great feeling. So when we talk about the note taking, the spreadsheets, like if you can set things up where they are like accessible for new people to plug in, it's awesome for many reasons, including continuity there.
Thanks very much. So it's 4:30. If anybody has any final questions, I think we could probably take one or two more, or we can call it if folks are ready to call it. Much appreciation to all of your great info and super detailed slides. That was really wonderful.
Yeah, thank you all so much for coming. I really hope this was helpful. Again, don't hesitate to reach out. We love to talk to people about worker organizing. I'm also really glad that PZS was able to happen online. I love PZS every year, so I'm glad it still happened. Yeah,
I'm really grateful that that we were asked to do this and that we got to. It's really exciting to share about unionizing with people, because I think millennials and Gen Z are under organized, and I want everybody to catch the union bug. Don't be afraid. Reach out anytime. We put a lot into working with people who are curious about starting up.
Thank you so much. Everybody grab that email if you need it off of the chat before we close down here. And thanks a lot.
Thanks so much, Dan. Kate.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Great work, everybody.
Great job.
Thank you guys so much.
Wow.